Hello and welcome back to Law Torn, the podcast which explores what really happens when family feuds turn into legal battles. I'm here again today with my partner and co-host Philippa. How are you, Philippa?
I'm fine, thank you, Samara.
Good. And we're very excited because today we have our first special guest on the Law Torn podcast, Kristin Cunliffe. Hello, Kristin.
Hello.
Kristin is joining us today to help us discuss matters around the emotions around finances and for us, how that might impact on somebody going through the litigation process. Kristin has got a wealth of experience in all areas that is necessary to advise on such matters. You are a financial planner, a financial coach, and a financial educator.
Yes,
is that right?
That is correct. I am. Yes.
But of all of those, for the subject that we wanted to talk to you about mainly today is the financial coaching, I think, that we're really interested in, because that, as I understand it, is helping individuals to sort of understand their relationship with finances, money, etc.
Yes, that's right. So there's financial coaching can be done in terms of, I will go through your bank statement and see where you want to save money. That's not me. That is not the kind of coaching that I do. What I do is work with clients who, as you suggest, know that there is something within their relationship with money and with finance that is perhaps causing them a challenge. And they're aware enough that they would want to change that relationship. It is about emotions. It is about how they feel in themselves and how they feel around the conversation with money. And I think that certainly when it comes to legal matters, as I know we're going to be talking about, there is this huge sense of emotion very much wrapped up in finances. So it's supporting people when they have those kind of challenges.
How did you get into this particular world?
Of financial coaching?
Yeah.
So
the money emotions connection.
Yeah, so I by profession I am a financial planner, and I have over 25 years experience doing that. But I found that a lot of the clients that would be introduced to me through legal connections were often in a very highly emotive state at the time. That would either be through bereavement or through divorce, those kind of things. And I found that actually a lot of those people are very vulnerable at that period of time in their life. And vulnerability is something that I'm really aware of in the practice anyway. And then because of the education work that I do, a lot of those clients would be considered to be vulnerable through lack of experience and sometimes because they're quite young. And it was looking at how can I better support those people at a really difficult point in their life and having to make financial decisions when a lot of the time they don't want, people don't want to be in that position, particularly if you're recently bereaved or divorced. Then there's a lot of grief there and having to make long-term financial decisions at that point in time. It's really, really hard for people. And I found I was doing a lot of the kind of extracurricular support around that. And I just love the idea of helping people to understand, why do I feel like this? Why am I being, emotionally led by some of the decisions that I want to make? And how is that going to impact me in the long term? And I just was so fascinated about that idea of why do we do the things that we do? That's when I went through training and study to be a certified financial coach in 2021.
Right. No, I understand that. I mean, we do it, but without the qualifications, I think, and not particularly well sometimes.
It's true. I mean, and that's why when we first started talking, Kristin, I was really interested in what you had to say, because I always sort of hoped that these discussions that we were having, Philippa, would be around what can we do outside of support our clients through the litigation process, which is what we do know inside out. What can we do beyond that to actually offer them additional support? Because we recognise how difficult it is for our type of litigation, particularly because of the emotions involved, because they're is the breakdown of a relationship or the loss of a loved one almost inherently involved in the litigation that we advise on. It's sort of, I want to offer more support around that, but exactly that. I don't have the training to do it. So meeting you was fascinating to me because I was like, well, this is exactly the sort of thing that I would like to bring for my clients. So because it's something Philippa and I have spoken about a lot, but when we are advising clients, that from very early on, because of the costs involved in the litigation process, we're often trying to gently bring them away from the depth of feeling and the points that they need to prove to the financial realities of what will happen if you don't agree to settle something or drop a point, etc., which is very difficult to do. And we can recognise that on the one hand, but at the same time, we can see where that's going and how much it's going to cost them financially. So I think the idea of somebody who knows finances inside out, but also has that training around the emotions they're going through, to sort of have that support would be brilliant for most, if not all of my clients, I think.
Yeah, I think that the issue when you get into litigation, as you said, you mentioned it there about having a point to prove. And I think that for a lot of people, when there is some sort of contentious issue, vast majority of people want to be heard. They want somebody to understand what it is that they are going through, the point of view that they have got and the impact of those things. And that's fine if it's very black and white and you can write it down and you can quantify it on a piece of paper. But emotions aren't like that. And oftentimes people will be reacting to matters that are being raised by their ex-partner or another family member, and often won't understand why they are having that emotional reaction. And in their head, they can be completely logical people and think, I know that if I argue this point, it's going to cost me thousands of pounds, but I'm not prepared to let it go. And so I think sometimes being able to really explore that with somebody, and my job is to hold a very safe space for somebody to be able to talk freely, say whatever they need to say. It's obviously all completely confidential. There's no judgment involved. If it seems ridiculous to them that that's the way they feel, but if that's the way they feel, that's completely valid. That I think for some people to just have somebody support them to explore, why am I feeling like that? Why is this particular point so important to me? That actually the solution can be just being heard, just understanding where that has come from, and being able to let it go. And it's at that point you can say, okay, I'm willing to move forward now.
Yes, it's all partly about painting a picture of your future, isn't it? Because everyone's got a future.
Yeah.
Rather than living in the past. So coming to terms with whatever it is, whether it's I think bereavement must be really awful, but then a painful divorce after a long marriage, it is a form of bereavement. And you then have to go through lots of other stages, like meeting the new girlfriend or boyfriend or your children, having a relationship with them, and nothing to do with money particularly, but certainly that is so difficult that objectively you know that this other woman probably is perfectly nice and safe, but you hate her and you don't want your children to ever say they like her. It's very difficult.
But I think that you're absolutely right. And I think that the understanding who you are going to be when this process is over is also really important. Because your world has changed, as you say, through bereavement or divorce particularly. You're going to be a different person on the other side of the legal process. And a lot of the work that I have done with people who have gone through a divorce and supporting them through that process is helping them to understand the impact of a financial settlement. What will this mean for you on a practical level? And that's where I think that my experience as a financial planner is very helpful, to be able to sometimes explain to somebody, for example, how a pension share might work, or what kinds of income are you likely to be able to generate. But it's also helping people emotionally rebuild themselves and be able to face who they're going to be. And oftentimes, when this was not the future they planned for themselves, this was not how they saw their retirement years. This was not what they thought would happen when their children went to university, or certainly even in bereavement times. You know, if you've lost your partner and maybe you've got the children, you were never planning for that to happen. And so you've got some financial decisions to make, but you don't actually want to make them. And it brings to mind that there's a client that I still look after, and her husband died, and she had a large payout from life insurance that had been put in place. And she was in danger of spending her way through it because it was money she didn't want it. She only had the money because her husband wasn't there. And we did have to sit down and have some really heartfelt conversations about giving herself the space to be able to rebuild a future for her and her son. It's packed with a lot of emotion. And I think that when you are in your positions legally, because of the nature of the work, you haven't maybe got the 2 or 3 hours to sit with somebody to work through that with them.
Well, not without charging a ridiculous amount for it, or else getting in trouble with our superiors. But we don't know the answers. I haven't been through the process. You know, I am sympathetic, but I don't ever feel it's for me to say what a client probably should do. Do you tell people what to do?
I do.
I
don't do it. You don't mean to do it.
Yeah.
But you end up sort of saying, if I were you, I'd do blah, blah, blah. And you say things like, but life isn't fair. And I know it's a cliche, but it's so true. And you don't necessarily get a fair outcome if you go to court. You just spend a lot of money and feel particularly wretched if the outcome isn't what you thought was the fair outcome.
It's advice that I have to give clients as well. And yet it's not that I don't have faith in the system, but I still see that sometimes the outcome is nothing like what we would have predicted it would be. And I suppose that's what we call the litigation risk, isn't it? It's not always.
There really is such a litigation risk. You know, does the judge like tall men or short women, or the way
you speak, or
they don't even know that prejudice is informing part of their view of the case, but it's inevitable because they're human beings and it's a discretionary system. Yeah. So you really do take risks, and I've said to clients, well, it's a gamble. And of course, it's a throwaway comment, but it's profoundly significant for them. They're thinking, a gamble, I lost my husband, or my wife's walked out on me, or, so for them, it shouldn't be a gamble.
No,
it's not a horse race.
Sort of come to us expecting as experts and professionals being paid for the service that there should be an answer. But when it comes to litigation, no one can tell you the answer or the outcome of your case.
No, they can give you odds. Yeah. And they're very useful, but they're not 100%.
No. And given that risk and the money involved, because these days litigation costs are, obscene, even in my view. That's precisely why, if there is a way of persuading someone earlier down the line of the benefits of settling. It's something we were talking before we started recording, and the way you described it is the separation. It's not about being rational or irrational. It's separating your emotional feelings from the practicalities.
Yes. So I think if we have a look at a case where we would say, well, somebody's going to challenge the status quo, the what's in their will or what was in their prenuptial agreement, or, their financial settlement on divorce, and they don't feel that they are being fairly treated, then I think at that point, that's the point to be able to start having a conversation with somebody to look at, well, why do you feel that you are not being fairly treated? What is it about the proposal of the settlement that feels so unjust and so unfair? And being able to support somebody to say, where there is logical, practical solutions being put forward by your legal team that are setting out quite clearly, this is a process that we can go to and have a settlement, or if you keep pushing, we're going to end up in court. And so there is some kinds of agreement in place, then I think, and it's just that somebody can't say yes. It's why can't you say yes? And it's at that point to start looking at sitting down and working with somebody to see what's preventing you from accepting that proposal. And it might just be, well, it's because the other side have proposed it. And again, as I was saying, some people will sit very logically and say, and I know that makes no sense, but for me, I might have been in a relationship where I was always being told what to do, and this time I'm not going to do it. And that is completely valid as a human reaction. But it's not helpful in a legal process that's costing you money every time you dig in with that. So actually, by working with somebody, so let's work through those feelings and why you feel like that. And can you reason it in your own mind without having to go to court? Can you do that? Can you separate those two things from what is a legal process with a cost involved and your own sense of self? And work on the sense of self separate to those two things. But what happens is the two things come together and they're very well meshed in. And I think this is when we see people sometimes taking a decision because they don't feel that they are being given the opportunity for choice, or, that choice has been taken away from them too many times and they're not doing it this time, as I've said before. Or they just feel really aggrieved. They feel life has been unfair and I didn't plan for this, or, he or she was not faithful to me and how very dare they. And I understand all of those situations. I've lived through a few myself, I understand it. But I think to separate that sense of who you are and how this has impacted on you as a human being from the practicalities of just getting the financial thing done and sorted can be really very helpful.
Yeah. I mean, that can't be an easy thing to achieve.
Yeah, but I think what it can do, and it isn't like any change of behaviour when it comes to your relationship with money is not necessarily overnight. But I think what it can do is start somebody down a path where they can see a future, where this stuff is not going to hurt quite so much, where actually they're going to be able to build the life for themselves with what it looks like now, and be more accepting that these things are going to happen, that maybe a new partner is going to arrive on the scene for the other person, XYZ. It's not saying that the whole process will be finished before the matter is settled. Absolutely not. It can often open up cans of worms for other things. That definitely happens. I'm not a therapist, I have to say that, but there will be times where people will say to me, having gone through a coaching journey with me, actually, I think there are some other things that I really would like to go and investigate with a qualified therapist. So it will start the process, but it gives somebody hope that these things can be resolved. And actually it helps them to then start rebuilding for themselves, maybe before the litigation process has finished or the financial settlement has come into force. Because we know that those things can sometimes take months, if not years. And if somebody is sat waiting for their life to restart for the end of that process, you actually can look back and say, I wasted 3 years sat being angry, waiting for this process to finish. Whereas how much is time worth? How much is that worth to you? To just say, you know what, I'm going to settle this in my own mind. I'm going to feel how I feel. I'm going to work through those feelings of emotion, and I'm going to look positively into the future. That's priceless.
Although I agree with everything you've said, but against that, sometimes you just have utterly unreasonable opponents. So as I was thinking, it's not always the fault of the person struggling with the emotions and the anger and the jealousy, and because it might be they're also being met with a ridiculous opponent's position. And then there are times when you've got no choice. So it's not that you always have to settle. There are definitely times when litigation is the best outcome. And every now and again, when you go to trial as a lawyer and you've sat with this case for a couple of years and with the client and so on, and sometimes you get this wonderful feeling when the other side's being cross-examined, for example, and all the things you knew or you suspected were untrue all tumble out. I don't want people listening to think it's always their fault if they don't settle, because sometimes you haven't got a choice.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree. But I think that where this helps is to say that if somebody does have to go to court, because as you say, their other half is being completely unreasonable, that actually they can do that in themselves, knowing that whatever the outcome of this, I'm going to limit the effects that it's going to have on me emotionally, and I'm prepared for whatever the various outcomes might be. I find that once people have been able to look at why they're feeling quite emotional, they're more open to listening to the advice that they're getting from their professionals, be that in law or accountancy and things like that, because there's not the emotion clouding their point of view, that they can actually be a bit more pragmatic about it and say, okay, I've listened to what you've said, and I know that in court it might go my way, it might not, but not so upset and not full of the anxiety quite so much either about the whole going through the process.
Which is very daunting. I mean, there's no getting away from it. Anyone who turns up at court and thinks it's going to be straightforward and so on, they haven't been properly advised or they haven't listened.
The whole process is relatively unpleasant at best, I think, for clients, particularly in our areas of law.
Yes.
But litigation itself is naturally contentious. It's kind of, it's a long, drawn-out fight.
So people aren't used to it, are they?
And we're like soldiers in a way, which always hope the war will never come. Yeah. We're trained for the war that we're always trying to prevent happening.
I'm quite fascinated though, Kristin. So when you do have a client come to you at the beginning of this process, because I am aware that you have got this amazing test that you've put together to sort of work out your financial personality, isn't it? So I'm wondering,
Oh, I didn't
Philippa's looking at me like, oh. Which you can tell us a bit more about. So, because I was just wondering, what are the first sort of questions? What are the types of things that you're investigating with a new client about trying to work out what their relationship with money is?
So I would normally begin a session with asking somebody what has brought them to me, just to see if there is something that's in the forefront of their mind. So, it might be, I feel I'm always overspending. I can't make decisions about money that I should be investing, or I'm bereaved. I've got all this money in the bank. I don't know what to do. Whatever thing might be. That aside, most of the time what I will start conversations about is, so a really great question. Tell me your first experience of money. And from there, lots of things come out.
I bet.
It's a great question. What is your first experience of money? I'm very client-led by what I do. So although I have processes that I like to have in mind of where to structure conversations, I am very client-led by that kind of thing. But invariably with these things, there will be something that's happened previously that triggers stories that we tell ourselves about money and finance and wealth. Usually that will have come from when we are quite young. We do start to develop those ideas about those things when we are quite young.
So if you're a child who never saved, never put anything in their money box, would that tell you something about the person as an adult?
Yeah, so I think sometimes people's experiences of how they believed or what they believed about money and what they made money mean to them as a child can be quite indicative of then how will they behave later on around money. Also, how did their parents or caregivers act around money? Will also be something culturally as well. There is differences. So, the culture of, if you like, living in the UK will be one thing, but different cultures, different religions, particularly if people are not from the UK, they've lived somewhere else, they've moved here. Like, all of those things all feed into then, what do I believe about money, and what do I believe about money and wealth in relation to myself? There's emotions that come up around money that we see, like shame and guilt, responsibility, all of these things, and they will all come from somewhere. There will be something that will have built into this. So, yeah, to answer your question, I would start with a conversation about what is money to you, what does it mean, and what has it meant from when you've been probably quite young, and then we can take the conversation forward.
Normally, will it sort of lead you down one of a few paths when you have got that information from your client about the sort of formative experiences with money? But I suppose, does everyone fall into a category with bits of other categories?
So in general, there's kind of roughly 5 sort of behaviour personalities, if you like, on the test. So we have people who are planners. So those people who are very into the detail of things, and they make a plan and stick to it, and they like to be very organised and regimented. We have so architects, they're called. So then we have people who are very impulsive. So, oftentimes you see this with people who are impulsive spenders and so on, and they will do all of that.
Do they have a label?
Impulsive, yes. So the impulsive. So then we have the innovators. Full disclosure, I'm an innovator. That's why I have 3 businesses. And so I love the creation of things, and oftentimes you find people like artists and stuff will also be that. We have pacifists, who are the people who just couldn't care less. Like, they're like, oh, I'm not bothered. I'm not motivated by money at all. This is my daughter. She's an artist. She's like, oh, money, what's that? Not bothered. And then we have the empaths. So people who are the givers. And oftentimes we find that people who give a lot of time and money without putting in boundaries will be in those categories. And most of us have got some of all of it, to be fair. And so in that way, yes, like, our natural behaviours tend to fall into these kinds of categories to varying degrees. But in terms of why do people behave how they behave, there could be times where I might sit and think, I know exactly why you're feeling like this, but that's not for me to say. Okay, that's for somebody else to discover and get there themselves. It's not for me to sort of go, right, this is what's wrong with you. There you go. Like, sort that out. Because human nature is that the parts of us, if you like, that deal with money and finance, and then the parts of us that deal with our sense of self-worth and our own value and what we feel we are allowed, etc., like, does repeat through human beings. If you look at sort of psychology, which I've done a lot of work into, there are traits that we develop as humans, and most of us will fit broadly in those. Yeah.
And there is a view, I don't know where I read this, that the British hate disclosing how much they earn. They'd rather talk about sex than talk about... There's a real sense of privacy.
Absolutely. We do not talk about money in the UK nearly as much as we should. And you're right. You probably know someone's sexual orientation before you'll know how much they earn. There's a reason why a lot of, recruitment and job advertisements and things don't put a salary on. And if I see that kind of thing, I always call it out, because especially women will not apply for jobs where there is not a salary guide on it, which is not good for equality.
They're just...
A lot of women will be put off because they won't know, because a lot of people, and certainly women and obviously trans women, etc., will look at the salary and to make a judgment of whether or not I can do that job.
Yeah.
Whether that job is
It's
for
within
me.
my range.
Yeah. And so by not putting it on,
Don't know where it falls.
there's a lot of people who will say, well, I won't apply for it. Because what if that job was significantly higher paid than I am used to? Like, and I don't know, so I just will not it. And I actually think that it speaks very well to a culture within an organisation if you are willing to talk about money and what everybody is being paid. So certainly in this country we have a culture where don't ask your colleagues what they're earning. Like, everybody will keep it really, really secret.
I never do that.
Now, who does that benefit? Sorry, people who own companies, but who does that benefit? It doesn't benefit the people who are working. So we have a very, very different culture around the conversation of money than some other nations.
And that is sort of nationwide, I suppose. Yeah, I've just never really thought about it, but I've definitely come across people who just adamantly, no matter how long I've known them, I still have no idea how much I'm asked, and I do. No. So my husband used to live in the United States, and he says there, like, people would say, "What is it that you do?" And what does that pay you? And it's like the next question, and it's not rude. It's not. It's just that's okay. But moral, we would never do that here. We would never say in the UK, how much do you earn, unless you're like a financial planner like me, and then we have to ask. But people don't talk about inheriting wealth, and I wonder, with the work that you do, Samara, whether this idea that people don't know what is going to be in a will, because we're not going to talk about those things and that kind of idea. I think we still have a very big culture where one person in a relationship will do all the finances.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's particularly gendered still. I don't know if you find that.
It's age. I think the older divorces, there may be usually, not always actually, but usually the wife won't have a handle on the finances. But then I have cases where the wives completely control the finances. But I think it's often, if you're in your 60s, 70s,
usually
it's more likely to be the husband. And so when you're getting divorced, it can be a revelation. Or it can be a complete con, you know, what
the other side's like. A revelation that you're being lied to.
But I think everybody who's going to enter into marriage or civil partnership should have financial coaching beforehand.
Oh,
I do.
Yeah.
Because I think there's so many decisions that we make as when you enter into, you know, a life with somebody on a financial basis, that if you don't speak about it before you head into that relationship, how do you know whether one person would like to spend money on private education, for example, and the other person maybe would not? You know, ambitions for where do we want to live? What kind of holidays do we want to have? Do we want to favour saving for the future into pensions and investment planning and things? Or actually, are we living completely for the moment and, you know, we'll live on the state pension perhaps? And I think if you're not having these conversations before you enter into marriage or civil partnership, you could be storing yourself up for a
lot of arguments. Yeah. I'm thinking that would have been very much more helpful than the church-based discussions that we had pre-marriage. Yeah. I definitely think that is
Would
a good
it
idea.
have made any difference?
Well, I hope
when you're looking into someone's eyes, you're not thinking, what's their view on pensions?
No, I know, but it would just be interesting. I think it would be less shocking when it came up that you're so off base with each other.
Yeah.
You know, that if because it all sounds a bit in the future, wouldn't matter, doesn't matter, I love you, etc. But at least you will have heard what their starting point is. And then when you get to that point,
and then you
have some idea where they're coming from.
See, the idea would be is that you would have a money date every month and sit down with your other half and you talk about your finances. It reduces financial infidelity, which is a huge issue.
What's financial infidelity?
What's the money date?
A money date is when you sit down with your other half and discuss your finances.
Once a month.
Once a month. I mean,
That sounds like a really good idea.
Sounds terrifying. I can know because I would be cross. At least once a month, I will sit down and be cross with you for half an hour while you tell me, no.
Rather than a sort of underlying kind of anger that's
yeah.
the whole
Exactly,
month.
that's better.
So a money day is exactly that you would sit down and you would go through your finances and you would just maybe check in with each other to sort of say, are we putting the right amount of savings here, there, if there's money, if there's financial goals that we're working towards, are we doing well with that? These kind of things. And just to know what everybody's finances is, because, and I don't want to bring the mood down, but if someone suddenly drops dead, or is ill, then at least we kind of know what everything is happening and so on. And it does, as I say, can help to reduce financial infidelity, which, to answer your question, what is that? Is where one person in the relationship maybe will make financial decisions that have a negative impact on the family finances or the couple's finances, where it is being hidden. So maybe, a lot of spending on credit cards, taking out debt, not telling the other person about it, this kind of thing, using money just for themselves, that they're not being very open and transparent about, buying clothes, buying jewellery, gambling, social activities, whatever it might be. And when somebody realises that has happened, the emotional impact can be as bad for some people as if they'd found out the other person had an affair.
Yeah, I can see that.
Because it's deceitful and it's impacted on them as a person with the finances. Usually we would find this might end up with debt issue, and it just feels like a betrayal emotionally.
Yeah.
So that's financial infidelity.
I've had a few, all wives, I think, a sort of running away fund. So it's the opposite. It's saving money that you want to have there in case everything goes wrong, and you've always got it there as some security. Yeah. So it's the opposite of running up debt.
Yeah, I think that's quite a traditional, traditional thing, like as if everybody does it. But I do think that back in the day when women didn't have their own money,
I feel like we've had a brilliant conversation. I want to bring you back and talk solely about financial infidelity, which is my new favourite term. Right. Well, Kristin, thank you so much for coming in. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking to you.
You're very welcome.
And thanks to everyone for listening. We will see you next time.